friends, and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. In each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. Hey everybody, I am excited to talk to this week's guest. This is going to be so great. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're at, what's going on.
I am Amanda McCoy. I am an elementary librarian. I serve kindergarten through 5th grade. This is my 12th year in the library, my 14th in education, and I am located in Lawrence, Kansas.
Nice. I've got family out that way myself.
Hey.
So you actually were just telling me that you've got something real interesting going on this year, something brand new and exciting.
I do. This is my first year at my building, and being a librarian for a while, I know all of the programs that I want to have up and running, all the ways that I want to have student art displayed, student voice taking place in our decision-making processes. And man, if I am not my own worst critic, knowing the 800 things I want to have up and running and getting bummed when I only get to 695.
Yeah, right. I can really relate to that. But I imagine at some point, hopefully, you'll be bringing this lesson to your students, to your new staff and students at your new school. So I think they're going to be very excited because I know I am very excited about what goes on in this lesson. So before we get into that, let me just take a quick sidestep. How did you end up in school library in the first place? What was your journey like to get there?
I started out in music education, actually. I was an elementary music teacher going to 4 buildings every day for a couple years. And just for a couple different reasons, it wasn't quite a fit. I was thinking about other things in education I might want to do and remembered how much I loved our public library growing up and how I just idolized Mrs. Thatcher, the children's librarian. And so I looked into what that would look like, kind of moving over on the pay scale and using the education degree that I already had. Just seemed like such a great fit. I was so excited about going to library school and getting that degree and being able to serve in an elementary library.
That's awesome. I love when people have that library experience that brings them to wanting to be part of the library and not just be like a visitor, but like an active, engaged, I am going to be part of the library world.
Yes.
It makes me so happy. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this lesson? Sort of how did you come to this in the first place?
Sure. This lesson is a product of COVID when we couldn't touch or talk to each other at close quarters and had to kind of keep our own space. So I was trying to think of opening our students' eyes to all different types of media. And one thing that I know that I really enjoy and a lot of other friends and educators that I have enjoy is podcasts. And man, are there an amazing amount of podcasts made for kids these days.
Yes.
So I wanted to give them a lesson that would introduce the concept of a podcast in case they were not familiar with it. Many at this point are, which is great. And really give them some time to explore a different podcast or two, giving some guiding questions, some things I wanted them to focus on instead of just having it on the background. Give them some time to actually focus and listen to what's happening in the podcast and analyze it and really think about, especially for our older students, how the form of a podcast is different and similar to other media that they consume and other places that they get information.
That's a great idea. I love using it as a comparison of like sort of information literacy skills in a way to kind of say different media might have different ways they present information, or we still need to look at some things are going to be the same across media. Like we've got to look at where is it coming from and what perspectives are we thinking about as we're looking at it.
I really think of this as a lifelong learning tool. Also, students can kind of, if we allow them to investigate a lot of different methods of getting information, they can find something they love and, take that forward in their journey. It's great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, so is this a lesson that you do with all of the grade levels that you were working with?
I currently do this with third, fourth, and fifth grade, and I do repeat it because there's so much student choice. They can choose different things each time. I could easily see it being expanded down to kindergarten, first, and second. I currently do lessons with podcasts with them where I pick the podcast, but I think once I've taught that a couple times, I'm going to start moving this down the grade levels and give them that choice that the older students have.
I gotcha. Oh, that's a great idea too. I mean, the more agency we can give them, the more that they're going to be invested. I love it.
It's one of the best things about the library, Steve. I love it.
Yes, absolutely. So, how about what would you say is maybe the main objective or the primary objectives of this lesson as the students are going through it?
Our objectives are for the students to be able at the end of this to describe what a podcast is and kind of be able to compare it to a couple other different forms of media. And I want them to have spent some time listening to a podcast enough that they know a little bit about it. Like this is what the podcast focuses on. This is what my episode was particularly on, and this is a nice little factoid that I learned, noting that we can learn things from podcasts.
Nice. I love that. Is this something that these classes doing because they're listening to podcasts? I'm imagining this is pretty much an individual as opposed to sort of a whole class. We're doing this together, sort of an activity.
Correct. As long as the class can handle it, I really like to allow them to get up and move around the library. I do have some students that will choose to listen to the same podcast and sit together, and I make sure to have some headphone splitters in that case if they
Ooh.
really, really want to listen to the same one at the exact same time. I want to facilitate that. That group learning, group listening is wonderful. But I have a timer up on the screen so they know kind of how much time they have, and there is a very clear indication for when they need to come back to the whole group.
I gotcha. Okay, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of a headphone splitter, but that's a great idea. A couple of
Yeah,
things to have in the drawers ready to pull out and get going.
exactly. Yeah.
So they're doing their individual or in small group work. What's the first thing they're going to sort of see and do? Do you give them constrained choice? Do you just kind of say go wild? How do they approach finding their podcasts?
So in our whole group portion at the very beginning, when I'm describing the lesson, what's going to happen, we do a little bit of discussion, finding out what the kids already know, and kids can learn from their peers in that way. And that way also, if you have an expert in the room, you give them that ability to inform their peers and be like, you know what, I know what this is. I know what a podcast is. I can't wait to tell everybody. We do a little light comparison, and then we'll do it a little bit more intensely at the end. I have a very short video that introduced the idea of a podcast, and then I talk about how people can do many different things while they're listening to podcasts. I have a great graph that's out of Australia talking about all the different things that people do when they're listening to podcasts. And then I show them the choice board that they'll have. They get to choose from several different podcasts, and I give just a 1 or 2 line description of each one, kind of like your mini book talk on each different podcast. So they can start to get an idea, and I have them mark on their paper because the choice board is printed on one side of their paper. Mark the ones that are a little, their ears perk up at.
Nice.
And after they have those choices and they have access to the choice board, I send them off and monitor to make sure that we're all on task.
I love that. And one of the things I love about this lesson too is when I think about kids listening to podcasts, I could be wrong, but I imagine a lot of them listen with their families if they're listening to podcasts, like
yes,
on the
the ones
road
that
or
say
home or
it
something.
too.
Yeah. So that's a great way to kind of bring in that home connection too, is like, here's an activity we do at home, but here's something we can learn from that activity too.
Absolutely, and expand that vocabulary of podcasts that maybe they haven't heard of before, and students bring in podcasts I haven't heard of before too. It's wonderful that way. It works both forward and backward. I love it.
What a great way to build some community too, like just build up the fact that home and school aren't necessarily separate things. We're all people and we're all learning together.
Absolutely.
Really love that. So, okay, so you've done the whole instruction, you've given them some constrained choice, they've gone off to listen to their podcasts. They are theoretically, let's say that they're working on their own. So as they finish up listening, what are their next steps in the lesson?
So as they're listening, I have a a student response sheet that I asked them to fill out. And depending on the grade, I asked them to fill out different parts and pieces. Fifth grade class is gonna fill out the whole thing for me. Third grade class, I might just cut down to a few pieces instead of blowing it up to the big thing. They're writing down some interesting facts or some plot points if they choose to listen to a fiction podcast. They are drawing an illustration that they feel like exemplifies the podcast. They talk about what they were thinking. They rate it. And then hopefully, as they've been working on those things, I am very accepting of any state of doneness of that worksheet. We can come back in and we'll work with what you got. Whatever you got down, that's what we're going to work with in our reflection piece. Because we do want to take a minute to kind of think about what are some of the things that we got from this. Why did you choose that episode? What did you think? And then shoot it out even farther to talk about like, hey, so in your life, what are some times when you could think of that you might listen to a podcast, or some things that you might be able to learn from a podcast, and talk about those both at the table and then as a whole group together.
I love that sort of priming of, we're not just doing this just once, just now. Like, I want you to think ahead and think about where might you introduce this as a regular practice in your own life. I love that, bringing that inquiry learning and like student motivated, directed sort of learning, but also getting them thinking about themselves as learners and consumers of information. That's great.
Yes. And we can even like start to think about things that the students know that, hey, what topic that you really know a lot about, would this be a good medium for you to share that in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of just being
them as creators also.
Yes, exactly. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have them make I know it's not necessarily part of this, but do you have students that make podcasts?
I have not personally attempted that yet.
Okay.
I did have a couple students at this new school say, Mrs. McCoy, can we make podcasts? So that might be in the future.
Okay. All right. I love it. I also love, as we're talking, I'm throwing down quick little notes and thinking about the fact that you have them illustrate an important point is such a cool idea, like kind of bringing in sketchnoting basically to help them visualize what they're seeing.
Absolutely. It is getting some of those visualization skills front and center, trying to think of ways that we can visually represent the things that are happening orally. It's great.
I bet your teachers love that too, that you're helping the students kind of think about a different way to take notes and a different way to sort of summarize their thoughts and ideas.
Yes, absolutely. And this is another lesson that I've done with younger grades, actually, and with an older grade too. Jeff Glade puts out a lot of great things about taking notes for podcasts. And I really enjoy one where he does some note taking with AutoDraw. The kids will take notes of just some keywords during the podcast so they can kind of remember what's going on. And then after the podcast, we'll use AutoDraw to make like a summary of the thing.
Interesting. I don't think I know AutoDraw. How does that, you put in text in it?
No, it's oh my gosh, it is the best for little kids because you start to draw something and along the top it will say, did you mean? And has these clip art images that are like really simple black line of like, hey, did you mean a sun, or did you happen to mean an ice cream cone, or did you mean this? And you can click on it and it makes your drawing that thing. And you can make it bigger, smaller, fill it in with colors. Oh, it's wonderful.
Huh, that's really cool. I love it. Getting lessons inside of lessons here. This is great.
Hey.
I love too that you've got them rating and sort of reviewing the podcast, because as folks who are going to be growing up in a very heavily online oriented sort of society, ratings and reviews can be so important, and helping them start to think about how do they share their thoughts about it, and maybe what are some of the benefits and drawbacks of ratings and reviews. Like, it's my personal opinion. Maybe it's not going to fit everybody, but that's a great little tool too to kind of get them thinking about digital citizenship and just general community building.
It's also wonderful to give them another opportunity to give language to why they gave it the rating that they gave it, not just, that was good, that was bad. Okay, let's expound on it. Let's pull some things from the episode like you would from a text and say, why? Why did you think this? Why did you write that down? Why did you choose that rating?
Do you use like any kind of citation reminders for them when they're doing that kind of stuff?
Oh, I don't, but that's a fantastic idea. I really would like that addition to this lesson.
That might be a nice little, I was just popped into my head. If they're going to have to sort of say, here's what I liked, throw in a little citation lesson to say, hey, when you borrow information, make sure you see where it came from.
Absolutely. That's a great tie-in to other lessons that we have. Fabulous.
Nice. Tie it all together whenever we can. Love it. So they are doing notes, they are sketchnoting, they are reflecting, rating, reviewing, lots of great intellectual, academic building of skills going on, but in a very organic and I think authentic way that the kids are, since they're choosing what they want to listen to and respond to, it really gives them a lot of freedom to use these skills in a way that is personally relevant to them and not just necessarily like, you're going to get a grade on this. Do they get a grade on this?
They do not.
Okay.
I don't give grades, and I really enjoy that place in the school.
Yes.
Being an area where kids can try lots of different things. They can fail, and it's not going to affect a grade. It's not going to get them in trouble. It's just a space where they can try out lots of different things and get exposed to lots of different stuff and not worry about a grade. I love being that space in the school.
Yes, I totally agree. As a former English teacher, I am very much on board with the not having to assign a grade to things and giving them the opportunity, like you said, to succeed or fail without the pressure of, if I don't succeed, I'm going to be in trouble.
So after that timer goes off that I do have up for them to visually see, everybody comes back together, and there's a little bit of sharing that I ask them to have at their tables, like in their table groups, thinking about just sharing what it is they chose. Did you choose ice cream versus French fries? And why did you choose that? And what did you think? Kind of a low stakes, not a big group to share with, and hoping to get everyone at the table to share just a little something. And then we'll go bigger when we talk about the bigger reflection questions of where can you see yourself listening to podcasts? And I'll call on some friends that want to share and talk about other things that we could learn, other things that they could perhaps create also.
I love when students get to recommend things to each other. Like, I listened to this and I really liked it. Or even if it's I listened to this and I didn't like it, at least then there's some discussion about, oh, well, what did you like? Like, they tend to really open up when you give them those opportunities.
They do. And the other students take those recommendations so seriously. Like, okay. I mean, if you say so, I'll give it a try. That's great.
Yeah.
Whereas I could say the same thing to them and be like, that is okay.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, it's very much a whatever.
Yes.
Totally. Yes, I am familiar with that. How much guidance do you sort of provide as you go? You said you've already given them usually like a notes sheet that has both some constrained choice options on one side and some note-taking suggestions on the other side.
Right. I try to give them, as long as they're actively listening and actively reflecting on it, I try to give them as much leeway as I can. If your sketch note is like taking off and it is really helping you listen to this podcast and reflect on it, you know what? Skip some of the other questions. Like, please just go ahead and do that. If you are getting really into the rating and you want to talk about these are the reasons why, I really want to give my reasons, Mrs. McCoy. Awesome. That is wonderful. I would like you to focus on that. I don't insist on everyone's reflection looking exactly the same.
I love that automatically gives you some great differentiation for the students that are working at different levels or in different areas of ability or, different levels of skill with sketchnoting or with writing or whatever it might be. Like, they can really find the thing that works for them and pursue that.
Yes, it makes the lesson really accessible, which I love.
Yes, accessibility is so important. I love this lesson so much. How did you decide on what resources you would use with this lesson?
So I combed through some best of lists and kind of put together things that I thought the kids would like to listen to in terms of podcasts. And I have since changed some of those based on the student reactions. Either no one listened to this one, or Mrs. McCoy, I really love that. You should definitely keep that on there. And then other students have listened to podcasts in the past and recommended, like, hey, there's also this other one that's really great. You should put it on this choice board so other kids can listen to it. Okay, will do.
I could see that almost being like a pre-lesson activity. Like, hey, if you listen to podcasts, like, give me the names of some of the podcasts you've got. Let's brainstorm and see what we come up with, just as a way to sort of get a sense of who's listening, who's not, like what kind of areas are they interested in or not. Like, that might be a fun little group activity.
I love that. And then you have student voice, like in your next lesson right there already. They can see something that they said that is now part of the lesson because of them. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And then you could always obviously supplement with like, oh, and I've also got some others for those of you that weren't sure if none of this worked for you. That's okay. We got some other options too.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So how long have you been teaching this lesson, would you say?
I have taught it for 3 years, and I have not taught it yet this year.
Okay. And in the new school, may or may not quite fit as you're trying to roll everything out. I can totally see why that might be.
I'm pretty sure we're going to do this lesson no matter what. We need to know. We need to know about podcasts. And it's a good gauge, too, for me to get to know what the kids know and what they don't, and what holes and gaps we need to fill and what things they're already experts at.
Yeah, well, that's true, too. Is this something that you do basically just as a library lesson, or do you collaborate with any of the other teachers on this?
So far, it has just been a library lesson, but oh my gosh, there are so many opportunities for collaboration with other specialists, with other grade level teachers in different subject areas. I mean, there's science, there's math, there's music, there's physical activity. Like, there's just so many things that we could do.
Yeah. Oh man, I can see this spinning in so many like great directions. Like we can go across disciplinary, we can go up and down grade levels. Like this is just such a wonderfully adaptive lesson. Man,
Yes.
I love it so much. Having taught it before,
Mhm.
what changes have you made or might you make to the next version of this that you're going to do? Are there any things that kind of leap out at you as like, I started here and then kind of learned the hard way. This was a way to go instead.
Right. I've learned to set very clear boundaries on where the kids can and cannot go in the library when we're doing this, because some friends will find the corner that you didn't know you had under a back table and and try to shoehorn themselves into a place where you cannot be there helping guide them. When I really want to be actively monitoring everyone to make sure that we're on task and that we're really accomplishing the goals of the lesson. So that's one. Having the timer up has been great too. So kids are not forlorn when their 17-minute podcast is cut off by our 15-minute timer.
Mm-hmm.
That helps them kind of accept the fact that, okay, I'm not going to get to listen to all of this, and that's okay. I know this going in. It's not going to be a surprise.
On the bright side, if they're that into it, that's a great incentive for them to come back to it later and kind of pick it up on their own. So
Yes, it absolutely is.
Got to look at the positives, right?
I do now also put the QR code for the choice board on their paper. One, because it's super accessible, like their iPad's right there. They can scan it, but they can also take it home and listen from there.
Nice. Yeah. Love it. I usually would ask about built-in supports at this point, but you've already pointed out how wonderfully adaptive this lesson is. You can kind of the students can kind of roll with it to whatever level is appropriate for them. And just kind of thinking about it, actually, I was just realizing too, you could probably do this with like world languages as well. So if you had students that were maybe our ELL learners may not be as capable in English, but maybe there are other ways to bring in other languages.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. I have a lot more students that are English language learners this year, and that would be a wonderful thing for them to be able to listen to something in their home language. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I wonder, there's just off the top of my head, I'm realizing there's some logistical issues of figuring out like, how do you find kids programming for students in other languages? But I can just imagine what a wonderful moment that would be for those students who maybe don't feel as capable in English, but then have their home language that they can try and work in instead.
Oh, I love that.
Now we got to try and figure out how to find those podcasts for them, but we'll get there.
Yes, we're librarians. We can do this.
That's right. Absolutely. So I know you haven't done this lesson with these students in this new school, but at your previous school, what kind of feedback were you getting from the students when they did this?
Oh my goodness. It is the best when a student gets excited in class. And it's even better actually if they don't seem excited in class, but they come back the next day. Mrs. McCoy, we had a road trip to my grandma's and we listened to 5 episodes of Smash Boom Best, and my parents love it now too, and my brothers and sisters, and just the way that they can take the lesson and take it to other places in their life is just wonderful and so very satisfying. I love that the best.
That's awesome. Oh man, that's such a great That's when you really know something has landed, that the kids are coming back to you to tell you about it. Not even just like in class, but like afterwards, they got to come and tell you, oh my gosh, this was so cool.
It is the best. And they're taking school and the things that we're learning out into their world. They're not just pigeonholing it, right? Like, this is what I do at school. I am a different person.
Exactly. How about, have you gotten any feedback from teachers about this lesson? Have they kind of come back to say what students are taking with them into their classes?
I have a couple teachers that have students in the building will stop in and say, oh my gosh, we listened to this in the car now. Thanks for introducing it to us. And others have stopped in to say, thank you so much for allowing this student to kind of investigate a topic that they are just obsessed with. Like there's some that they could listen to, on Minecraft versus Roblox, or Marvel versus DC, and having the student get some time to just focus on that during the school day will just light them on fire, and they're so excited. They're in a different mood than they were at the beginning of the day. It's great that way.
That's awesome. That actually, I just had something pop into my head that I forgot to ask before. Do you usually use I'll say nonfiction podcasts versus fiction podcasts, or is it sort of a mix?
It is a mix. I will say it does lean heavier nonfiction, just because I want to get a really broad variety of different things.
Sure, absolutely.
In the nonfiction realm, yeah.
Just when you said Marvel, it made me think there's a great 6-episode Marvel podcast, Squirrel Girl. If you've never heard The Amazing Adventures of Squirrel Girl, this podcast is hilarious, and I bet you kids would love it. So it's literally just a limited release. Yeah, I think it would be right up their alley. If somebody wants to take this lesson and run with it, what kind of advice do you have for them besides make sure the kids aren't cramming themselves under a table someplace?
Right. I will say that I do this lesson after we have gone over expectations for working other places in the library, and after we've gone over expectations for a lesson with so much choice in it. That accountability of me being right there all the time is not part of this lesson. They are away, and I'm circulating around looking at what everybody's doing. So we talk a lot, and we do other lessons that kind of stair step them to the freedom to go where they want to pick what they want to. Definitely talk about spending the time to listen to most of one episode instead of 2 minutes of this, 2 minutes of this, 2 minutes of this, 2 minutes of this. Well, I love the exposure that provides. I would really like them to spend some time and understand how they get further in on a topic in depth rather than just bouncing around.
Those are all very important points. I'm really glad you brought those up. That's not something that would have occurred to me to let's make sure we scaffold the extra inquiry freedom that they might have, and also just the stamina element of that, of saying, yes, you're going to stick with this for a bit, even though you may be used to 30 seconds on TikTok.
Yes. That is what we're working with. So it really needs to be talked about up front for sure.
That's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. All right. We are now going to go in a completely different direction. Book break time.
Woohoo.
Yeah. So what is a great book that you want to share? It can be something that you personally loved. It could be something that's professional. It could be something for students. It could be something for staff, whatever. But you get to pick what's a book you want to share with us that we should know about.
Oh, I'm going to cheat and do a series. Annette Whipple has written these nonfiction books. There is one called Ribbit. There's one called Woof. There's one called Meow. And they are just a spectacular series on different nonfiction topics that are great additions to elementary nonfiction collections, because they are not written in the most traditional the most traditional way for those very high interest topics, right? You have a full dog section, you have a full cat section, but they can get kind of stale. If you have some that are 13, 15 years old, like their kids probably aren't checking those out as much. But these just have the biggest, most beautiful, gorgeous photographs. And they have a lot of really close up photographs too, for kids to see, like frog eggs that they haven't seen that close before, or the whiskers on a cat. It talks about the animal's behavior, and they're just phenomenally wonderful. I was so excited to add them to our collection this year.
Nice. I'm going to have to check those out, man.
Yeah.
I love a good nonfiction book, and I love a good, I'll say picture book. It sort of sounds like very visually oriented.
Yes, a better lap book than read aloud, just because there are so many little bubbles and sidebars all over the place. But it's a really great thing for a kid to dig into and kind of read the things that they're interested in the most.
Nice. I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure
That's
thing.
a great recommendation. So, if folks want to follow you in the future or find you in the future, touch base with you, how are they going to do that? What's their best option here?
I would love for you to follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, or Blue Sky would be the best thing. I am at Illini McCoy. That's ILLINIMCCOY. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Illinois. I also have a website called ahoymrsmccoy.com. I found I was posting so many things on social media that I might as well have a website to house all of them. And then I have a YouTube channel also called Ahoy Mrs. McCoy. And I have a series called Library Things to Know that I use in class every week. We do everything from teaching procedures to making announcements to announcing different contests that we're going to have in the library.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ooh, I didn't realize you had a YouTube channel. I don't know how I missed that.
Oh, I do. And my kids are so impressed by it, let me tell you.
Definitely going to go check that out. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I so much appreciate you being here and sharing not only this amazing lesson that I think can work so many wonderful ways, but also a great book recommendation and some great ways that we can touch base with you in the future. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes, which include not only a link to the lesson, but also links to the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have an idea, a question, or a lesson you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's school, L-I-B, learning@gmail.com. Know someone with a great school library lesson? Let us know. Until next time, be safe, be good, and be well.